Welcome back to Worst Seats in the House. Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta coming to you live from Tuttle's. Really nice of everybody coming out on this very cold Monday morning, Monday night, as the Buffalo Sabres just took a shootout or a 2-1 lead? There we go. Oh, not a good turnover there at the blue line. Alex Tuck.
That's a great way to start the show for people that are going to be listening tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, it is
Here's some random things that I'm seeing right now.
Hey, Anthony has a medium-sized T-shirt in front of him, and I found out it's because you thought that the large was going to be too big for you.
I wear mediums in everything.
All right. Don't brag. All right. So here we go. January 22nd is our next live show. That is at Elsie's. So hopefully everybody comes on out to that one. We love coming out to Elsie's. Again, January 22nd. We will also have one live show in February. It is hard to do two in February because I'm gone for 2 weeks for the Four Nations, and Anthony's going on vacation for the first time in a while, going to Costa Rica, which will be fun.
First time in a marriage.
Yeah.
Literally that it's a no work at all. Margot's taken a couple trips. She obviously comes to Europe with us on those trips. So we've traveled together from time to time, but never on just a 100% vacation.
Yeah. And this will be right the first before the pandemic started, you went down and you had to rush. Didn't you have to rush back to the country?
No, that was the pandemic hit, and because of that, Margot was already going on vacation. So I just was like, all of a sudden the game was canceled. They were leaving like 3 days later to go to Mexico, she and Ariana. So I booked a flight, joined him in Mexico for like 72 hours. And then we were already scheduled to come back. And our flight got out like 12 hours before America wouldn't let any more flights back in.
Yeah, that's what I remember. So, crazy.
But we had a vacation planned the next year to take a cruise during the All-Star break. And we booked this cruise. It's going to be the first vacation of our marriage, which we were probably 28 years in at that point. And we booked this cruise. And then the league announces that they're going to come back because they remember with their games being postponed and canceled. And so we're cutting into the break. We're going to schedule games. So we had to call to cancel our cruise. And because of it, we were going to lose like 20% or something. And in the interim, the cruise company went bankrupt. Then they canceled the cruise anyway because of COVID. So we just lost it.
Wow.
So lost 100% of our vacation on that trip. So that we haven't this is the next one we've scheduled after those two.
Well, we're excited for you to go on that
I'm excited.
trip. Yeah. So we think our live show in February is going to be February 5th. So pay attention to our social media for that, and you'll see the announcement. Or on next week's pod, we should have that a site confirmed. Thanks to our newest sponsor, by the way, Clamshell Beach Resort, that is up in the Whitefish chain here in Minnesota. You'll learn more about that later in the show, but really thankful to have our newest sponsor on here to join our very, very other loyal sponsors. So thanks to everybody for having us, for joining up with this awesome fun podcast with Anthony. I've had a migraine all day, by the way, so there's no better medicine.
I can't be held responsible for that. I haven't even talked to you yet today.
It could only get worse. Let's put it that way. One funny thing that did happen on this road trip, and we just got back from 2 straight victories, was John Hynes played a little joke on Anthony at a scrum in Raleigh. And it was very funny because I thought his acting was terrific. But so we went out to dinner the night before the game, and we went to the Angus Barn. I went out there with Wes Walls and Kevin Gorg and Sarah McClellan. And of course, our table is right adjacent to the entire Wild staff. So Bill Guerin, John Hynes, the entire coaching staff, the management team, they're all having dinner at the Angus Barn. So as they're walking, they come up to say hello to us. First of all, Capuano dropped the bill on my table and thought that I was going to pay it, but I think he was kidding. But we told him, they immediately was like, "Where's Anthony?" And we told him that Anthony is not a big fan of the Angus Barn, So John decided that it would be very funny the next day to tell him to in front of the staff, like, "How was your meal? Have you guys been to the Angus Barn? Best steak I've ever had." And I thought he did a great job with the way that he did it. Like the actual, to me, it was as good at acting as we've seen from the head coach.
It was. Now he described it as that you guys put him up to it when I talked to him the next day. But he also, so he says, yeah, it's the best steak I ever had. And I'm a fully admitted steak snob. And the steak at the Angus Barn is not very good. The atmosphere is really cool. It's unique. If you go to Raleigh, you should go there. It's worth it. But there's 15 better places to get a steak in Raleigh. The steak just isn't very good. They have a big vat of Cheese Whiz by the front door when you walk in. I mean, it's
not
just
anymore.
But they're always decorated for Christmas. It's a cool place to go see. You should go see it. I've been there enough now.
It's not Cheese Whiz.
Well, it's processed fake cheese.
I don't buy it.
Do you think real cheese comes in a vat like that?
They give out free gingerbread cookies.
They do.
It's just gotten bigger and bigger.
Right,
and bigger.
and there's some really. It's a cool place to see, but the steak isn't very good. So he sells it during the scrum.
He's like,
and
best
right
steak
away,
I've ever had.
Kevin Gorg, who thinks Applebee's is elite dining, turns to me like, "Whoa, what do you think of that?" And I said, "I've had better. I'm not going to argue. If the guy liked it, he liked it. I don't like it." And so he couldn't even maintain it though until he walked away. He turned and said, "Sorry, Panther, those guys put me up to it." So then I see him in the hotel elevator, and I said, "I can't believe you stepped into all that jackassery from that crew." And he was like, "They talked me into it. We're good." He said, "The steak was mediocre at best. The place was kind of cool." That's what he said. So then that night in the postgame press conference, Russo tried to tell him he was going to get fined for mentioning a video coach's name for a successful challenge, and he just turns to him and says, "Well, Panther's going to fine you for last night." So it kind of went both ways, but the bottom line is with all of it, if you go to Raleigh, check out the Angus Barn once. It's fine, but don't go there expecting to have a blow you away good steak. Go to Feller's Ranch for that. Their steak's light years better than what you'll get at the Angus Barn.
Angus Barn is an awesome restaurant. If you go there, you'll absolutely love it. I guarantee it. All right. Big couple games coming up this week. St. Louis Blues coming to town on Tuesday night. Then Thursday night, we'll see the Colorado Avalanche for the first time, probably at the worst time, by the way, because holy mackerel, McKinnon and Rantanen are absolutely on fire right now. I think, doesn't Rantanen have like a 13-game point streak? McKinnon's got a 7 or 8 game point streak. McCarr's got almost 50 points already. So it'll be interesting to see the Wild against a couple good Western Conference teams this year. As we've talked a lot about on this pod all year long, if the Wild gets to the Stanley Cup final, they should win in 3, let alone 4, because they just beat the Eastern teams for fun this year. They just went to 2 Eastern Conference Titans in Washington and Carolina. I thought played 2 of their most impressive games all year long, and that was without Jared Spurgeon, Jake Middleton, and Kirill Kaprizov in their lineup. But they've got to start doing this against the Western Conference, Anthony. And St. Louis comes to town Tuesday, and then Colorado.
I think the 2 games on the trip were maybe most impressive because of the fact that you're facing 2 teams that have been great at home all year. You're doing it without the players that you mentioned, 2 of your top 4 defensemen in Spurgeon and Middleton, your best scorer in Kaprizov, coming off of games where their game had slipped. And I know that there have been some different feelings, and John Hynes has talked about it a little differently, like, well, I didn't think we were that far off in some games. But the bottom line is, starting with the Dallas game, the Wild had 3 of their 5 most porous games in terms of high danger chances against since the holiday break. Then they went out there, they gave the Capitals 3 high danger chances the whole game. Carolina ended up with 8, but 6 of those came in the third period, 5 of them after Minnesota was up by 3. So most of it came once the outcome was decided. I thought they were the 2 most complete games the Wild have played all season.
I heard that was the angriest Rod Brindamore has been all year long at his team. He, as he always does, held it together when talking to the media, but in the locker room wasn't very happy. And understandably so. They, the Wild were good that night, but they did lack energy. They've played a lot of games lately. They just came back from a big emotional win in Florida. And come back, you play a Western Conference team. And funny enough, I was talking to Jordan Stahl in the morning, and we were talking about just the schedule as a whole. And he was talking about how just sometimes in the dog days of the season, it's just tough to grasp something to get you going. That the game has become monotonous. What we were talking about was an in-season cup and whether or not maybe something like that would make sense in the NHL at some point. What do you think of something like that? Because it is true. I mean, it is, when you get to around January 1 to February 15th, February 30, about a couple weeks before the trade deadline, those are when games really start to slip. Do you think that this is something that could spice up the dog days of the season?
Boy, I don't know. I mean,
maybe you'll just paint the ice different color. That'd be cool.
No, I mean, I think it's a waste. I really I hope they never do. Yeah. I think I'm worried about the long break every year when they have it over this, now the Four Nations or an Olympic break. I always worry about how much you disrupt the season and lose all the momentum that you've developed at that point with your fans, but also with your players and teams. I just think it's such an awkward thing to all of a sudden thrust in the middle. I don't like it. Okay,
that makes sense. Let's talk about the two games. I thought the Washington game was good as they've played all year. That they win in a shootout. It would have been a tragedy if they didn't get a point, let alone two. Rossi came to the rescue as usual there in the third period with his third tying goal in the final 10 minutes of the third period, which is a league lead. But I thought from the opening puck drop, they had the better legs. They had the better chances, spent a lot of time in the offensive zone. Really, the only time in that entire game where I felt like they were under a little bit of pressure was the one shift where their second line got caught out there. There were a couple turnovers, and then Bogosian had to take the penalty. But didn't you think that was as good as a game they played?
Yeah, and right from the start. And I think maybe the most impressive part was the fact that they started as well as they did and then wound up short for 4 minutes. And yet just they killed the penalty and then immediately resumed, picked up right where they left off. And I thought the starts in both games were outstanding. And the Kaprizov, Boldy, or the Zuccarello, Boldy, and Rossi line has been just terrific a couple games in a row now. I think they've got some things going, and hopefully if you get some guys back, today Middleton was back on the ice, that's a good sign, might be able to play as early as tomorrow night. Once you start to get some of those guys back, you're starting to see a club that I think you just have to. This isn't a start anymore. This is just who this team is.
I was talking to somebody with the Wild yesterday that even said the same exact thing. There are times where I think that you just don't know, and lately the way that they've been playing when the going gets tough, where you just think, all right, all these guys are out. You just have the sense that they're back to finding their structure. I mean, they've won 5 of 6 games, including that Chicago game, but 4 of 5 without Kaprizov. Like, who would ever think that? And that has been the story of their season. They start the season with 2 games at home, then they go on the 7-game road trip, and you start to look at the schedule in June when it comes out, and you're thinking, wow, if they don't get off to a good start, they could be out of it by November. Well, what do? They go the first what was it? 6-8 games of the season without even having a deficit. Let's be honest. It would have been more if they could have, it wasn't Gus's finest game in Philly, to be blunt. But they go out and they have this unbelievable start. And then even here, they come out of the break. Kaprizov's not in Dallas. They lose Spurgeon. Now they're going to 2 Eastern Conference heavyweights, and you're just thinking they're going to be lucky to get a point on this road trip. They come back with 4. Been the story of their season.
Nothing knocks them off their game.
Yeah,
and
it's crazy.
They've had some stretches with injuries. They've had some bad luck. They've had nights where bad calls went against them, and they just haven't let it knock them off. And that's why I just think now you're halfway through a season. This is just who this team is.
Yeah,
they're a good hockey team, and maybe a great hockey team when healthy.
They close out the first half on Tuesday night against St. Louis, start the second half on Thursday against Colorado. Marco Rossi, I mentioned him, the tying goal the other day. This guy has 9 points in 5 games without Kaprizov, just named #1 star of the week. It was in 2021 on January 3rd where he was diagnosed with myocarditis. He comes back from World Juniors where he wasn't very good for Austria, was exhausted. Every time we watched the interview with him at World Juniors, he was pale, looked sick. They give him a random, training camp, essentially, physical. And thank goodness they diagnosed him with this heart ailment. They shut him down. He goes back home. He doesn't know what the heck is going to go on for the rest of his career, let alone life. And here we are 4 years later, and he's named number one star. So much has changed in this kid's game. He's on pace for 70 points. And everything
he's almost
that
on pace for 80 now.
Yeah, exactly. Everything they've asked of him, he's done. He has just been, to me, one of the great stories of this hockey season.
Wes Walls and I were talking about this a lot on the last trip because we've been talking about hypothetically, what would you do if you were the guy in charge? What kind of a deal would you start to look at for Rossi? And I think my argument to Wes has been that even on nights where he looks like he's off, then all of a sudden, then he makes a play at the end of the night on the tying goal or the go-ahead goal or the winning goal. And he's only had back-to-back scoreless games one time all year, which is unbelievable. And I think you look at it, he, for whatever reason, has always been a guy that people look at as what does he not have? Doesn't have Eriksson Ek size, doesn't have the girth in front of the net, or what? But what he has is something the Wild have never had before, and that's the skill in a center's body, the skill set, the scoring touch, the pass, the hand-eye coordination in front of the net. We have never had that guy. I mean, for years when you had Mikko Koivu, everybody talked about, well, he's not this. He's not a natural scorer. He's not a playmaker. Well, Marco Rossi is. And for whatever reason, everybody continues to look at him and talk to him about what he's not rather than what he is. And what he is a guy that's pretty quietly nearing point-a-game status.
Yeah, exactly. Joel Eriksson Ek was asked after the game in Carolina, does Marco remind you of you, just from the standpoint of slow start, and now he's, finding his game, and he goes, well, he's a lot more skilled than me. And he laughed. But he said personality-wise, very much so. And it's funny, I can't remember who it was. It might have been Foligno on this last road trip. It'll come to me, but somebody said the same thing, that he's very much his personality. It was Foligno. It was personality in the locker room. Oh, it was in my story on Rossi. Foligno said that his personality is very much like Eriksson Ek, just so professional, and you don't think of that because he's so much more undersized. But just think of their games; they go to the net and all that type of stuff.
His knack for making plays around the net is really crazy. Amazing.
That goal that he scored in Washington was unbelievable. The tip, and what I love about him is there's no flybys with him. He stops at the net. And that was something, if you remember, when Eriksson Ek first got into the league, we used to harp on that. He always went past the net, didn't wait for that rebound. There, he stops at the net, and he's got that play that puck right in front of him on the Hartman rebound. And same thing, Huzandinov, this is something he'll learn too. One reason why he flubs a lot of these rebound attempts is because he's not stopping it in front of that. He's just continuing to go by. So that, clearly Marco knows where to go. Let's talk about Kaprizov. He's still day to day. I think it's the one thing I want to make clear, because I've seen a lot of cynical replies to the whole day to day thing on Twitter, is that day to day, like if he winds up being out week to week, that doesn't mean that he was never day to day. Like he is legitimately. They are trying to figure out what this is. He's dealing with soreness. He clearly has a groin. I believe that he just left town and came back after getting some treatment somewhere. And now they're trying to see how it responds, and then hopefully you get him back on the ice. So it's not like the Wild are lying here. When he first had the injury, like a lot of times with groin injuries, especially, you are day to day. You're trying to see how it responds. Does things like that. So they keep on winning without him, but this is something that, as Bill Guerin said the other day when we got him in Washington, they've got to make sure that he gets healthy from. Could he be playing right now? Does he want to be playing right now? 100%. But they don't need him playing right now. They need him playing in March, in April, in May, and June, hopefully. And the only way to do that is to get this thing healthy.
Yeah, and just to kind of wrap up your day-to-day thing, it's because each day they're hoping that today's a good day.
Right.
Like to wake up tomorrow and all of a sudden things feel great. You've responded properly to this. But yeah, they've given themselves a cushion, and I always hesitate to say it because it makes it sound like they've just assumed that they're in the playoffs. That's not the case, but they've got enough of a cushion where if this was the last week of the regular season and they needed 3 wins in a row to reach the playoffs, he'd be on the ice. I'm sure of it. But right now you've got the ability to say, let's make sure he's healthy. Let's give it time and make sure that when he comes back, he's back for good. Why not be patient right now?
Yeah, I would agree with you. And again, week to week means that when you sprain your MCL, you know that player is week to week. When you break your finger like Jake Middleton, you know that player is week to week. This thing with Kirill, they were hoping he'd be back right now, but there is a reason why he's not skating right now. It's not because he can't skate. It's because they are basically making sure that he gets this thing 100% because they don't want to have what happened to Jacob Lauko, where Lauko was gone for a while, came back for 3 games, aggravated it in sort of a nothing play against the Flyers, and now he's missed 9 or 10 games since. He skated today. Middleton skated today. Clearly they're close to returning. We'll find out at the morning skate Tuesday what the lineup looks like. A little concerning that now illnesses are going through the team today. Freddie Gaudreau was so sick he had to leave practice. Matt Zuccarello, who this concerned me because I was basically face to face with him after the game the other day when we were interviewing him. He didn't practice today because he's ill. As we all know,
Devin Shore was a late scratch the other night because he wasn't feeling great.
Right.
And, you never know for sure what those kind of things are, and they can run through a team and disable you quickly. But hopefully that's not anything major going through the club right now. Yeah. I got the feeling that Middleton, I would guess, is ready to go tomorrow night, but we'll see. And Lauko probably not quite yet.
I will say Middleton, I'm a little surprised by, because I know for a long time he's wanted to come back tomorrow and that they were going to do all sorts of stuff with his glove to make sure that he could play and all that stuff. And that I got the impression that the doctors weren't going to allow it, but clearly he's won that battle. They feel that he is obviously structurally healthy there in the hand, or they wouldn't let him come back. But I still thought they were going to wait a little while, but clearly I'll be interested to see how he's able to shoot the puck, because they're going to probably have to do something to the glove to make it, everything tenable, to make sure that he could play at a good enough level where he's not going to re-injure his hand.
He was a full participant today. I watched him. He wasn't exactly like just standing out there blasting one-timers, but there was nothing that happened where you thought, okay, well, that he looked like he was favoring something there. He just looked like Jake Middleton.
Yep, that's good, because he was playing at an elite level by the time he got hurt. You can come up on and ask questions at any point, by the way. Again, January 22nd is our next live show. That's at Elsie's. February 5th, we'll have a live show as well. I do want to talk to you about the World Juniors, Anthony. The Wild have a player in Zev Buium, and I was thinking today how life works sometimes, because if everybody remembers my reporting at the draft at the Sphere in Vegas, the Wild were this close to trading their first round pick to the Winnipeg Jets for Rutger McGroarty, and there had to be one player on that board to fall for them not to make that trade, and it was Zev Buium, and somehow he falls down there. The Wild are able to move up one spot with the Flyers to get that pick, and there you have it. This kid is an absolute stud. He is Brock Faber from a standpoint of an ice time where he could play probably 30 minutes a night and not look, not even sweat. And then I don't know if he came off the ice in overtime, but then, as I tweeted before overtime, it's Zev Buium time, and man, did he prove it. What a freaking saucer
he was
pass.
Terrific. I watched a few of their games, didn't see every game, but his game looks really sharp. And we noticed it immediately this summer when he was here. There's just a guy that's just different than everybody else with the way he skates. I think he's going to be a terrific player. It's
going to be real fun to see the World Juniors here next year. We probably won't see it because the Wild will have probably an 8-9 game road trip like Ottawa just had. But it'll be fun. I mean, there'll be a couple Finns back in Kiviarju and is it Soini, who didn't play a ton. Soini. Soini. He didn't play a ton in this tournament, but obviously both of them won silver medals with Rasmus Kumpalainen, who will be pro by then. Ryder Ritchie's somebody that will have a shot with Canada next year, maybe Woodsky as well. And then obviously we'll see who Judd Brackett in the Scouts draft in this year's draft, and maybe some of them could be in the World Juniors, because it'd be nice to have a good Wild continue in the World Juniors. They did trade their first round pick in the David Juracek trade, so that probably makes it a little less likely that they'll have from this draft World Junior participants if they're Americans and Canadians. Canada. I mean, what a disaster! Lose in the quarterfinals second year in a row. just a total mess. And
well, and there's just something about the way, and it's not just this year, but they have such an arrogance with the way they carry themselves. Just everything about the way that they walk in the rink, the way there's just something about it that it doesn't really bother you to see them lose.
Yeah, and that people are going to resign. I mean, Justin Trudeau resigned today, right?
Yeah.
Hockey isn't the only thing happening on the ice, and as lakes are freezing over, it's time for ice fishing. OnX Fish offers the most comprehensive fishing tools for increasing your confidence and success on the hard water. Use the Fish app to find new places to fish and sort lakes by species, abundance, trophy, and keeper potential. OnX Fish also shows you hotspots, lake-by-lake regulations, and private and public land ownership information. For a limited time, download OnX Fish for free in Minnesota and Wisconsin, or go to onxmaps.com/fish to get more information on the app that is changing the game on ice.
Save smarter and grow your funds faster with a certificate from Royal Credit Union. Royal's 4.25% 9-month certificate has no minimum opening balance and a locked-in rate for a guaranteed return at maturity. Open a 4.25% APY 9-month certificate at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 12/5/24, insured by NCUA.
Hey, have you been dreaming of a lake cabin lifestyle with boating, fishing, and family fun in northern Minnesota? Well, lately I've thought a lot about how cool it would be to have a getaway like so many Minnesotans. And if you're like me, you probably think that owning your own lakeside getaway is beyond your budget. Well, if you think lake cabin real estate prices keep going up, well, think again. This is Russo, and I'm here to tell you there is an affordable way to enjoy a cabin lifestyle and all that goes with it. And yes, I said affordable. I founded a Clamshell Beach Resort, which is located on the Whitefish chain of 14 lakes for you and your family to enjoy. Here's how. Clamshell has lake homes that offer deeded fractional ownership, and the keywords there are deeded and fractional. You own it. Imagine having 5 weeks a year to enjoy Clamshell with its beaches, pool, and lodge that's full of kids' activities. Is golf your game? There's a great golf course right across the road. Like winter sports? Well, you can go ice fishing, cross-country skiing, or snowmobiling right out the door at Clamshell. And there's no maintenance, no grass mowing, no snow removal. It's done all for you. And you can own a share of Clamshell Beach Resort at an affordable price. To learn more about ownership opportunities at Clamshell Beach Resort, go to cottagesonwhitefish.com or contact Pat Egan at 612-220-9819. That's cottagesonwhitefish.com or Pat Egan at 612-220-9819.
There you go. Ken Cutler, you're starting off. Counselor.
All right. I know you touched on this in your podcast, but if it only costs $100,000 to run a so-called optional practice in contravention of the rule that you can't have practices between the 24th and 26th, what's to prevent other teams from doing that, especially when you've got a team like, for example, next year, the Wild will be in the same situation of having to travel on the 27th, presumably to play somebody, and likely a Central Division opponent where it's potentially a 4-point game.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about this.
Why wouldn't you spend the money?
We talked about this on last week's show. To me, I think the penalty has to affect you on the ice. It's got to be a draft pick lost. Yes. And Toronto violated the rule by flying early a couple of years ago. I think they got fined the same amount, or
Flyers
might have been $200,000.
No,
I can't remember. And I always just thought, well, that's just stupid. That owners with a ton of money will say, oh, I don't care if it gives us a competitive advantage for one night. It's worth it. I think you have to start to penalize them with draft
just
picks.
One thing you said, what's to prevent teams? You know, there could have been 20 other teams. We just don't know it. The idiocy here is that Pete DeBoer admitted it, which is how this got out. All of a sudden, I got wind of this in Minnesota and went right to the league. I'm like, what is this? Like, you know, I to be blunt, I sent them the audio. I'm like, listen to this. I mean, he says they practiced, and that's essentially where this all started. But I agree with you. Like, to me, this should be, you know, you lose a draft pick, they get a point in the standings, and what's going to be I mean, look at the standings right now. Look in the East, especially the wild card. Everybody's separated by like 2 or 3 points. So in the West, conceivably, that 1 point for Dallas, you know, could hurt another team. And not that they got the point because they practiced the day before, but the point is that they did a big FU to the league and practiced when they knew they shouldn't have, and got caught for it. And yet really, it doesn't affect anything. Like at a minimum, you want to make this, you want to cause teams to stop it. You find the coach in this situation, $50,000, there you go. And I guarantee you, like John Hynes isn't going to want to throw away $50,000. I know these guys are all, handsomely paid, but you find a coach that in that situation, I bet you that that guarantees that nobody else is going to do it. So that's just me.
So second quick question.
Yep.
Are the Wild?
If nobody else gets online, you might get 10 quick questions.
Do the Wild have?
Don't throw that kind of stuff out there.
Do the Wild have any concerns about Volsted's development at this point?
Not that they're sharing. I'm a little concerned. I mean, I'm trying to look at it still with the old Marco Rossi. We all thought Marco Rossi, or some people thought that Marco Rossi wasn't going to be who he is, and it takes a while. This is a goalie. It takes a while, things like that. But the Wild have had a lot of quality young goalies in their system over the years. The Gustafson kid years ago that won gold in the 2011 World Juniors. What was his name? Jonas Gustafson.
Yeah, well, remember the time when they traded
Kakkonen.
Matt Hackett? Everybody thought it was the biggest mistake ever. The guy ended up being nothing.
And so, like, to me, I still want to see this guy show that he is the player they think he can be. And right now he hasn't shown it in the minors. He's hurt again. He's up here. Actually, he's been up here working out and rehabbing his injury, and he's working his way back to getting back into Iowa's lineup. He's obviously had a very tough year. So, I think they should be concerned. And this is why I still am not closing the door on Marc-Andre Fleury. I think that, first of all, we know how much Fleury loves the game. I think like all 40-year-olds, I don't think he loves the summer working out. He actually told me that when I did that sit down with him in Florida, during that first road trip, but he loves playing. And I just think, and the only thing I think is the only way that he wouldn't retire is if it was here. Well, we all figure that he's essentially going to have to retire because you got Gustafson and Volstead next year. But if Volstead does not show any ability at the minor league level to prove that he should be the backup here next year, there might come a point where Bill Guerin's got to at least have that conversation with Flower, like, hey, is this something that you would consider coming back? And this is total conjecture on my part, but I'm saying this based on the fact that right now, Volstead does not look like he is ready because he's not even winning in the minor leagues. And so that would just be my opinion. But you asked, is the Wild concerned? They've given me no indication that they are concerned. But I got to think behind the scenes, the conversation's like, what do we have here? Is this the guy that we thought he was going to be? We will see. Time will tell. Takes goalies a while. Doug.
Nope, Paul.
Oh, Paul, sorry.
Doug's sitting over there. Doug's sitting over there.
Yeah.
You're
Doug's
all blurry
my
all there.
accountant.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's true.
See, I just want to let you know, Michael, I called Aquarius Home Solutions for
Nice.
a Connecticut system.
Did you tell him that Russo sent you?
I told them Russo sent me.
Okay. Did they even know who I was?
He said, who's that? I said, sports guy.
Yeah.
I said, Rossi? No, Russo.
We're going to have to tell Hannah to let the company know to make sure that's fixed.
I got
What's
one
up?
for you, Anthony. It's bright sunshine out today. There's no snow out. How cold is too cold for golf?
Today would have been. I had to walk my dogs, and by the time I got back, I would not have played today. But it was about a week and a half ago, I did get a text from my buddies at Loggers Trail saying, we're going out to play the back nine if you're in the neighborhood. Unfortunately, it was a game day for the Wild, so I couldn't do it. We played.
Such a pro.
Yeah,
Such a pro.
I think the coldest that we ever played, we played in December a couple of years ago when it was sunny and there wasn't any snow. I think it was about 30, but with the sun out, it felt a little warmer. All I know is the guy in front of us, we had played 2 days in a row. They had just the course wasn't open, but They had opened it to a few of us. In fact, Dean Evison was out there that day. The guy playing in front of us brought an electric or a cordless drill, so he could drill a hole to get his tee in the ground because the ground was frozen. But once you got your tee in, then it was all good. It was great. I hit my first ever shot off of a frozen pond, and that was a mistake because I ended up flat on my back on the follow through. But it's always fun to play when it like bonus rounds in that kind of weather.
I played in the springtime when we bounced a ball off the frozen pond onto the green in the past, but not in the fall. So.
Yeah, we had a couple that day that hit the green and bounced as if they were on concrete because a couple of the greens that got no sun were frozen pretty solid.
I do have a wild question. The last podcast, you guys prognosticated for a while on the D pairs, and I just happened to notice that
none of them came true.
None of them were true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And look forward to April. Hopefully, Z Buium joins the team. Everybody's healthy. What do the D pairs look like?
Well, I still think that come playoff time, Zeev's probably not playing, but we thought that same thing with Brock, and he was so impressive in those last two games in Nashville and Dallas. Was it Dallas, Nashville, and someplace? Chicago and Nashville?
I think it was Chicago and Nashville.
And that he wound up playing. So we say that now it's going to be awfully tempting to play him. You know, if you play him though, I still think it would be Declan coming out because he's very similar to him because they're going to probably want the penalty killing of a Merrill and Bogosian, something like that. You know, it's hard to say because so much can
we're
change.
Assuming he's going to turn pro too. There's a chance he might say that's not necessarily a given. I mean,
the other thing
is a fair assumption. But.
And the Wild need to have the cap space, and right now that's going to be tight. Like they might not be able to afford him. I mean, for this year, which I don't think is the worst thing to not burn a year, but you could still have him around the team during the playoffs, things like that. But so I think it's very. Up in the air. Do you think there's any chance that Carson Lambos debuts Tuesday? I mean, Travis Dermott played 5 minutes last game.
Not if Middleton's back.
Yeah, I mean,
then you've got probably three guys that land ahead of him.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think it's. My guess would be no. I think it's great that he was a guy who got the call up, and his debut might not be that far away. But I don't think if Middleton's ready, it doesn't happen.
I still think Middleton might be a Thursday, but
he might be. But they were going to wait to see how he responded today. Right. That's what John said.
There's
after
also some
practice.
cap implications here too, right? Right. I mean, if he comes off LTIR, now suddenly they're going to be counting peanuts again in terms of and they just called a bunch of guys up. Let's put it this way: if they do have illnesses tomorrow and guys can't play, these call-ups that they just brought up, I believe, need to be afforded, and I don't think they can afford them all if Middleton is off LTIR. So they might have to wait, but we'll see. I mean, I'm doing this off the top of my head, but they're right up against it, and if Middleton comes off LTIR. I don't know if they could afford all the bodies if all of a sudden like a Goudreau can't play or a Zuki can't play or something. Question.
Yeah. Speaking of the cap space, what are the odds that the Wild end up taking a page out of Vegas's book with Jared Spurgeon being out and then acquiring someone at the trade deadline, kind of knowing that Spurgeon would be coming back around the playoffs?
I mean, very, very, unless he gets hurt again, they're saying that he's going to be back later this month. So then, they can't. But you're right. I mean, at the time when it looked like a major, major injury, and say he was going to miss 3 months, then you start thinking maybe it's 3.5
months and 3 weeks and miraculously are healthy 6 days before the playoffs start.
Exactly. So, that now that's not to say that somebody else doesn't get hurt and they go into LTIR. So frankly, that might be the only way they can afford to go out and make a big trade deadline move is if somebody is out for the rest of the season come around March 7th trade deadline. So question.
Yeah, I got another question about cap space. I
wish Matt Sells was here because trust me, he can answer it much better than me.
Well, I saw you tweeted a couple of days ago about the Wild usually send down like guys like Brandon Gaunce, Devin Shore, Travis Boyd to Iowa, and then they call them back up seemingly like the next day, and it saves them just a couple $1,000.
Yeah,
you said.
I think it's like for a league minimum guy, it's about $4,000 a day.
How does that end up saving him money?
Well, essentially, the way it works is that if you go below the LT, so even if you have a player on LTIR, if you go below the cap ceiling, now you're starting to accrue space again, because again, the cap is counted on a daily basis. So if those guys aren't on the team, now you're just accruing a little bit of money. So that's essentially how it does it. Then when they come back on, if they go back over, now you're not accruing money and you're sort of eating into that. So I almost need to have a piece of paper here to show you what I'm talking about, but you don't start at 88.5 million and it goes down. The way it works in the NHL, the cap is everybody has a daily rate, and the days that they're on the roster are what goes up to your $88.5 million essentially, which is the cap. And so if you are not on the roster, that player is not being added to your tabulation. So if you go below the LTIR, now you're accruing space again. So that's why he keeps on sending guys down, because he's trying to gain a cushion that allows them at the trade deadline to make some moves. So,
second question for Anthony.
But again, I wish Matt Sells was here because he could explain it so much better.
The injury part is the complex part, because it's the math is relatively simple. If you take the 88 million, you split it over the number of days in a season. Well, every day you're below that, you can then be over it on another day by just as much, because your total at the end of the year adds up.
Anthony, I know you're a big steak guy. I haven't heard you talk about barbecue on the podcast before, but I was wondering what your best barbecue in the state of Minnesota is.
Boy, I'm not a barbecue guy at all. So I'm not we were, I can't remember where we were. I think it was Nashville, and we had some sponsors on the team plane, and they were like, "Hey, we know you're the food guy. Where should we go for barbecue?" And I said, "You know what? I am the wrong guy to ask, because I'm not a barbecue guy at all, and I'm the first to admit it when it's not my area of knowledge or expertise. So I have no clue. We don't cook barbecue style at our house very often. Not a big slow cooker guy, and when we've done it with ribs, we've done a kind of a dry rub or a vinegar sauce that I like, but I'm not an expert, so I wouldn't be the guy to ask.
What's your plans? So, by the way, I should probably ask you off the air. Are you just going to stay in Vegas the entire time? Or are you coming back early, or what? Because of Linneman?
I was, a couple days.
So you are staying a little bit.
Yeah, the Sunday they play, and then the Monday, I think, maybe coming back on Tuesday.
Nice.
I have a room. I haven't booked a flight yet, though, home.
You should probably do that.
I know. I'll take a look at it.
I thought you did this in Chicago at the piano bar the one day. I
booked the hotel, not the flight.
Yeah. By the way, so we're at this piano bar in Chicago, and he comes up with this idea that we should all, me and Chad
It wasn't
grab.
my idea.
It was 100% your idea. Because they're like, Vinny's coming, and
it was
we have
Chad's
a whole thing.
idea. And then we texted AJ and Vinny on the spot and said, "Why don't you guys meet us in Vegas?" They both said they were in.
Yep.
Chad since bailed.
Yep. And Vinny's like in Europe.
No,
AJ's in Europe. Yeah. So
he's he's
Arctic
north
Circle.
of the Arctic Circle. So, and at first I was like, well, we were in Sweden. We were like a month before the winter solstice or whatever, and we only had daylight from like 10 to 3 every day. Mm-hmm. So there's no way there's any daylight up there right now. And I read somebody in my family looked at it. Yeah, you know what you're talking about, Dad? It's like 9:30 to 3:30. I was like, I'm just telling you what it was in Sweden. Well, we got a snap from AJ or something. They have some daylight from like 11:45 to 2, and the sun never gets above like 8 degrees in the sky or something like that.
Yeah, that'd be wild.
It's when they got dropped off in the middle of nowhere. Did you see that video?
Yeah.
Dropped off in the middle of nowhere and had like a mile walk to their cabin or something and using a little flashlight on their phone to find their way. It was a little scary.
Yeah, it was. They look like they're staying in an incredible place. But to finish the story, so we're at this piano bar, and Chad, who 3 days later texted us and said he's not coming now, even though this apparently was his idea. Who's the only one that booked flight and hotel while at this place? Me. And now so far I'm like there alone if you don't like book a flight. Well, you're there.
I'll get there. I just might not have a way home.
Do you think Margot probably wants you to book something?
I'll take a look at it.
If you have any more questions, come on up. I did want to, I don't know if you saw the odds today for that. I think it's betonline.something put out, but Did you see how close John Hynes is to Stefan Carberry? Like they are neck and neck, like as the two leading contenders for the Jack Adams right now.
Well, and they should be. Those are probably, we talked about it during the broadcast that night. They are two of the biggest point jumps from last year to, if they were able to maintain their current pace last year to this year, they're 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And interestingly, we had just seen Nashville, who was on the other end of the spectrum. Nashville and the Rangers are both like 35 or 37 points behind last year's pace, where Minnesota and Washington are both like 25 ahead. It's been really amazing what those two teams have done. And Washington is one that a lot of people didn't see coming. But when you look at the additions they made during the offseason, they were pretty shrewd with the people that they added. Adding Logan Thompson to give them a 1-2 punch and goal has been huge. Those guys have played every other night all year and been terrific. But the other little additions that they made have really shored up that team, a team that last year looked old and slow. They don't look that way anymore.
Yeah, it is interesting though. If you listen to our predictions podcast earlier, I did predict them to make the playoffs, and an editor actually pointed out to me in our surprise team of the Eastern Conference. I had them. I was the athletic writer that picked them. I also picked Utah though. Utah is there, but they're not there.
Yeah, they're not
they
there.
got within a point of a play. Actually, point percentage wise, they were right there at a playoff spot, right going into the Christmas break, and then has struggled coming out of it. Philip Gustafson, right there for the obviously Connor Hellebuck's running away with it, but number 2 front runner for the Vezina is Philip Gustafson.
Yeah,
right
and
now.
I don't even know that I think the perception is he's running away with it. If you look at their numbers, Gus isn't. They're not very different. Hellebuck has a few more starts than Gus, but in terms of goals saved above expected, they're 1-2 in the league, and they're only separated by 2 right now. And Gus has had a couple big nights in that area lately. I think Hellebuck's at like 23 goals saved above, and Gus is at 21. So they're not that different. I think the perception is because of the fast start that Winnipeg had, everybody just assumed it was Hellebuck's, but their numbers aren't they're not. In fact, Gus's compare favorably in a lot of areas.
Yeah, and obviously with Kaprizov being hurt, he's really fallen down in the Hart chart, and Art Ross and Rocco Richard.
Hey, it's freaking frigid outside right now, so now is the time to upgrade your furnace. Don't let an old, worn-out system leave you in the cold. Make sure to keep your home cozy and toasty this winter. Right now, you could save up to 25% with Aquarius Home Services Home Solution Sale. What can you do? Get a new high-efficiency heating and cooling system for your whole home at up to 25% off. So what can you do to get started? Schedule your free estimate today and stay warm all season long by going to AquariusHomeservices.com to schedule that free estimate. Aquarius, earning the right to be recommended. And don't forget to mention that Russo sent you.
We love supporting local businesses. We love working with local businesses. I started buying stuff at Twill in the Edina Galleria a long time ago. When I started this podcast network, I was really hoping I'd be able to work with Scott Dayton, the founder and owner of Twill, and I was lucky enough to be able to do so. Now my closet is pretty much all Twill stuff. I don't get free stuff. I don't get discounts. I don't ask for discounts. I go there and pay full freight because I want to support a local business also because the stuff is awesome. Just bought a fresh batch. I'm about to go on a vacation with my wife. Everything I'm packing is Twill stuff because it wears well. It's comfortable. It doesn't wrinkle on planes. It doesn't wrinkle in suitcases. It comes out looking good. It wears like iron, and I'm never going to have to replace it. It's just so simple. Everything from casual shoes to dressy shoes to golf stuff to dress stuff to suits. By the way, you get everything tailor fit, which really helps me out. And everything from, gopher stuff to winter stuff to summer stuff. They just have everything. So go to twillandthen.com, sign up for email updates. They won't send you anything unless they have a very specific event they want you to know about. They won't spam you. And go in there and say hello. Tell them we sent you. It's just a pleasant group of knowledgeable people. They are experts at what they do. It's the best men's clothing store in Minnesota. Go check out Twill online and in person in the Edina Galleria.
Leighton, thank you for coming up because I was about to get the Lady Bing if somebody didn't come up next. So.
My pleasure. How many, I got 2 questions. First,
you can ask
how many,
10.
Eastern Conference finalist do you think the Wild would been to in the last 15 years if we had to play Eastern teams in the playoffs?
They really have. It's been
always
several
played well
years.
against
They're always,
them, best record this year in the NHL against the East. And I don't know, I think it's partially because the style the Wild play, they've probably had as much stick-to-itiveness to their style, and that's a handful for those teams in the East.
Seems like the East is less physical than the West, for sure.
It's the teams in the West, it's a harder game for sure.
Just look, who was it? It was Tampa Bay and who just went out to San Jose, LA, and Anaheim, and both got swept. It was Tampa Bay and somebody really good in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah,
and
Tampa's lost 4 in a row, and most of it was on that trip.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was just the Flyers, but Devils. There you go. So I mean, 2 really good Eastern Conference teams go out. And like LA is having a great year, but let's be honest, you're playing Anaheim and San Jose. I think you get some points, and I think both went 0 for 3. So,
all right, second question: this team didn't really change all that much from last year, apart from the fourth line and the Iowa, call-ups being a little more NHL caliber. What is different about the call-ups this year that you think is making a difference, or do you think it's just like Gus is much better and bounce-back seasons from various depth guys?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just asked the exact same question, almost the exact same way. I did this podcast in Germany today, and the guy asked me the exact same way, like, what has changed? Because it's basically the same team. I mean, the guys they've been calling up, they don't score, but they don't give up a ton, right?
And that was the goal this year. They were going to be deeper, and I'll tell you what. I mean, I know that the guy gets ridiculed, and Yakov Trenyan is a big addition for this team.
He's been great since the break,
and that. He and Foligno playing together on that third line gives them a rugged third line that's tough to play against. And they've done it, whether it's been with Gaudreau or Hustadinov, they've been really good. And then the way that they structured it, these guys that they've called up are just different players. They're not the guys they had in the past, and those guys are all nice guys and good players, but a lot of those guys were guys who were top 6 minor league players who were never going to be top 6 NHL players. And now they've got guys who are built to be third and fourth line guys. So I think that's helped them. And then I think the biggest thing is just Gus. Last year at this time, we were talking about goaltending that was 30th in the league, and now they're in the top 3. Yeah. That cures a lot. So I think that's a big reason too.
Yeah.
Aren't some of the guys we're calling up like the top leading scorers in Iowa, though? Like
they're scoring in Iowa, but I'm saying their skill set is these are more veteran guys. Yeah. Like instead of calling up Sammy Walker on your fourth line, you're calling up Drew Shore, who's played 450 games in the NHL, or Devin Shore. I'm sorry. And then you got guys that are just built to play that kind of game a little bit differently. And then, I mean, we wondered about guys taking the next step because really, if you look for statistically, or at least offensively, the guys that you would think had to have a bounce back year, they're not scoring a ton. I mean, guys like Johansson or Hartman, they're not exactly like setting record paces for scoring, but the young guys have taken the next step. The Kaprizov was off to the best start he's ever had. Marco Rossi's off to the best start he's ever had. Brock Faber, even better than he was a year ago. So I think you're seeing the young guys just continue to grow, and that might be as big a reason for it too.
I think Trenyan will be big come playoff time, and I was kind of skeptical first 20 games, but I think he'll be just fine.
Yeah, you're telling me. I have been so impressed with him since the break. Like his game in Washington was outstanding, and that was even before the goal. And I just felt like his game in Carolina, he set the tone the first shift with that unbelievable play in front of the net. He's big, to me, the penalty killing the last couple games have been largely because of him as well. So, very impressive, and we should give him his due since he has taken, as you said, a lot of ridicule from a lot of us. Ken, you're back.
One last question.
I was trying to point out you dropped your worst seats in the house shirt.
Yeah. I thought he maybe dropped his briefcase with his very important papers that he usually carries around with him.
Somehow I think I lost that one. I don't know where it is, Anthony.
It's
Did you take
somewhere
it from me?
in Sicily.
Yeah, could be. Could be with our
We'll
bus driver.
We'll see if it's in Barcelona this summer.
Are you coming on the trip, Ken?
Yeah, of course.
Nice. Awesome.
So maybe with Buium on the way, we have less concern about this, and maybe Lambos has improved like they say, though last year it didn't sound particularly good. What about our other defensive prospects down in Iowa? Is there any hope for any of them?
Well, I mean, David Juracek is somebody that they're obviously, as Bill Guerin said when he made the trade, it's about an investment into him. They're going to let him play a lot down there, and hopefully he can develop into the player that they think he can be, because they obviously traded 4 big draft picks for him, or a couple of big draft picks for him. 4 draft picks, but 2 that you'd not want to just throw away. I still am told by people that David Spacek has a chance to be a player. He's elite every place but North American pros. So they've got to figure out why that is. Why does he look like at the World Championship and World Juniors that he could be an absolute stud? But so far in Iowa, he hasn't been.
I've talked to a couple scouts from other teams who have said they're less convinced that he's going to be a player in the NHL. But that's not to say the Wild are ready to give up on him. I've just heard a few that have said,
The one guy whose stock has definitely plummeted is Ryan O'Rourke. That's the one guy. Look, when you have a lot of these guys signed up for long terms, they just brought Middleton back. Faber's here forever. Buium's going to be here forever. Brodin, is not retiring anytime soon. You don't need every one of these guys to hit. The goal is to have a couple of them, but Juracek and Buium are the ones that they're really going to be focusing in on, and that's really the only couple that you have to, because again, there's only so many roster spots that you can have. Hey,
hello. So 2 questions: one about the schedule, and one about how does this team bring what they do on the road home.
Yeah.
So first question about the schedule is, so they play 22 hours after San Jose and Vegas. So when the NHL sets its schedule, do the teams set the times? Because why doesn't Minnesota screw other teams like Minnesota gets screwed? And who allows that? Is that a collective bargaining thing? And then on the schedule, how do they bring the road back to the Xcel Energy Center?
Yeah. Well, on the schedule, yes, that is the team set the time. Now, a lot of times it will be dictated by television and things like that. But the Wild need to do more of that, and they don't. They want those 7:00 gates and all that stuff. But my feeling is that this team has the ability to sell out all the time, whether they're playing at 1, 5, 4 midnight. They're going to sell out. So.
Well, the same thing happens in baseball, for example. I don't know about the NBA, but in baseball, it's the home team that dictates the time. So there's a lot of teams that they don't care if you're traveling or not. A lot of teams will give you a day game on a getaway day, and for sure if they're traveling, like the Twins, if they're playing a getaway day where they're traveling, they'll play a day game. But they'll even do it as a courtesy to the visiting team sometimes. And then there's some cities that just refuse. And like the Yankees never give teams a day game on a getaway day. They don't care. And the Dodgers and Angels used to be the same way. I don't know that that's still the case, but I've asked and the Twins have said, well, then when they come here, we won't give them a day game because they won't give it to us there. So there's some trade-off there sometimes, but I've never really understood why the NHL doesn't, if they've scheduled it so the team's playing again the next night, you should have to play that game. If it's a Saturday, it should have to be a day game if they've got a game the next night.
And a lot of it also is days of the week. So here's a good example is that in January, the Wild are on the road every single weekend. So like Colorado plays Wednesday night in Chicago. Well, you're not going to have a 5 p.m. Thursday game. So for the Wild, so they have to play that game at 7. Now, if that was on Saturday and the Wild had a 7:00 game and Colorado played in Chicago at 5, or on the day before, a 7 p.m. game, well, the Wild should move that up to 5 if other teams are doing it, because it's happening to them. So, they should start taking advantage of it. But, they don't have any weekend games this year to play those type of hijinks. The one thing I will say, because, Anthony and I a couple of weeks ago made a big deal on the schedule and how the Wild, seem to get screwed. The reality is that every team has if you look at every team's schedule, they all have gripes. I mean, the Vegas Golden Knights played in Edmonton last month and had to play in Minnesota the night after and beat them. The Wild, 3 of the last 4 home games, if you include the Colorado game. So Colorado St. Louis, and then the 2 right before. Those teams played the night before. So the Wild split those 2 games. It's up to them to take advantage of it. So like everybody has to
The
deal
only
with
thing I'd say is that as I think I shared on the podcast, I know we talked about it on our broadcast, it isn't the same. The last 2 years, the Wild have played 21 back-to-backs at that time. Vegas had played 8. I mean, that's not the same. They can gripe, but they're not griping the same way the Wild are.
I'm just saying it's not illegal to beat those teams. If
no question about that. But what is bizarre to me is that they don't make it the same, at least within your division. It should be within a game or 2 of the number of back-to-backs you play. I get it that the teams in the Pacific might have longer travel. Well, then they should all play about the same number of back-to-backs. But then the teams in the Central should all play about the same. And instead, that discrepancy is almost 2-1 over the course of 2 years.
Hang on for 1 second to answer your second question.
The question. Game home. Yeah, there's a couple things I think about this. One is that this is a team that is, there's a lot of distractions when you're at home. And there's a lot of young kids on this roster right now. I'm talking about that have kids, not actual the players on the roster. And I just think when they get home, there's a million other things going on, and that can be exhausting. Not that they're not focused on hockey, but these are good guys. They get home from a road trip, and we might get back to our house at 3:00 in the morning. And I'm just guessing that when those kids are up in their houses, they want to get up and see their kids and help their wife and whatever. And that's an honorable thing, but it's a distraction. And they're not the only team dealing with it, but I just think that that's been a challenge for them, because when they get out on the road and it's 100% hockey, they have been a handful. I mean, this team is historically good on the road right now. We were talking about it the other night. If you throw out Chicago in the lockout shortened season of 12-13, there's only been 2 teams ever that have a better road points percentage than the Wild do right now. And they'd be the highest since the 05-06 Red Wings, I think, is the last team that would be better than them. And it's amazing how good they've been on the road. And I don't think their game looks all that different to me, but I just think there's probably something to be said for the distractions of being around home with friends and family, and people want tickets, and they're pulling you a million different directions. And can you make this appearance? Can you stop here? Can we go to dinner there? All that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, Jake Middleton, after he had his baby, Stevie, I remember the first road trip, he's like, I just cannot wait to go to sleep. Like, I'm so excited to get on the road. And he said that the second road trip as well, when we were out in California and Utah, he's like, oh, I'm getting so much sleep right now. It's almost the opposite of the way it used to be. Like in the old days when you had like super young teams, I remember I'd go on the road. I was telling somebody a story the other day. I won't say which players, but Jacques Lemaire used to spend the night on the road after playing a game in almost every city. And I remember I'd be on these 6 a.m. flights to go to the next city, and I'd be leaving the hotel at 4 a.m. and guys would routinely be coming in. And it was the same thing when I covered Florida. Now this is such a veteran team that it is funny. They don't go out on the road. They like they're in their hotels at 9 p.m. and it's probably at home where they're like, all right, I'm distracted now. So it's kind of like the opposite of like what you would normally expect. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah, I had to come up because my family's been laughing at me because I have the theory that there's a new baby effect. So last year when Gus didn't play well and Zuccarello.
Yep. Actually, Foligno was telling me the other day, he was joking that like this is like the first year we haven't had like any babies about to be born. Remember the 1 year there were like 20 babies born on this roster?
Yeah.
And I give him a pass because that's his third.
Right.
But when it's like the first baby, it screws up their whole lives.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Yeah, I found that the third and fourth continued to screw up life.
Yes. But now I feel validated with my family. They thought it was a wacko theory. So thanks for saying that.
Anthony ordered a pizza at his first baby's birth.
During the delivery. That was a mistake.
That didn't go well.
Didn't go well.
Yeah, it did not. And then your third baby, you decided to go like golfing or something.
No,
I
went up to a rehearsal dinner. I left about an hour and a half after she was born.
Yeah. And then you like came back and
they
like 2 days later.
They checked themselves out of the hospital and gone home.
Yeah. Margot was at Target.
Yeah.
The funny story, I wish Margot could tell the story. The funny story, she's wheeling Gianni around Target and like some woman comes up. He's like, oh, how old's your baby? And she just goes, 2 days. days?
No, she was 20 hours, and it wasn't even a day yet.
Yeah. It's like, where's your husband? Golfing.
I was at a wedding. I was in a wedding.
Yeah, but sometimes you gotta,
Yeah, it was. That's a long story, but the bottom line is I did leave an hour and a half after she was born to drive to Brainerd, and I got there for the tail end of the rehearsal dinner. So it was good. Everything worked out.
Last question of the show.
I have two, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
So I know you said Jakub Trenjan has been playing a lot better, which he has since the break. But do you ever worry about a team that's in cap space allowing $3.5 million a year to
I'm not
his caliber?
Yeah, I'm not
$15 million over 4 years.
I'm not justifying the contract. I'm just saying that you can see what they like about him and that he's playing well. Would you rather him on a 3-year ×2 deal? 100%.
Well, for sure, but you couldn't get him for that. And the only thing I'd say to that is look at the teams that win. None of them have a third line that's made up of guys making $1 million. The teams that win all have a third line that's $10-15 million between the three of them. And right now, that's what the Wild would have. With Foligno, Gaudreau, and Trenjan, they'd be under that norm. And so, yes, everybody. I wish they could get Kirill Kaprizov for $5.5 million. I mean, this is what it takes to get the guy. And if they didn't pay him what he did, he'd have signed somewhere else. So in order to get a veteran third line that can play with the kind of game that those guys bring, we got a graphic in tomorrow night's game that since the holiday break, number 1 and 2 for the Wild in expected goals for when they're on the ice are Marcus Foligno and Jakub Trenjan. Better, even with all the scoring Rossi, Zuccarello, and Boldy have done, the highest expected goals for when they're on the ice is those two guys. You can win with that.
Last question. You probably know this, but can you name the 4 visorless players left in the NHL?
Ryan O'Reilly,
Jamie Benn,
Pat Maroon. No. Does Foligno wear a visor now? He does, right?
He does.
I do know this. Bogosian. And then the fourth, who I 100% know, and I can't think of it off the top of my head, Reeves. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't have come up with Reeves.
Yeah.
I forget he's in the league.
Anthony, be nice. Be nice. Be nice. Well, thanks everybody for coming out to Tuttle's. Our next live show is at Elsie's. That is January 22nd. And then we'll also have a February 5th show at either Split Rocks, Elsie's, or Tuttle's. So pay attention to our social media for that. Thanks to our newest sponsor, Clamshell Beach Resort. Absolutely awesome that they're on board. Thanks to everybody for joining us at the Aquarius Home Services Studio. Aquarius Home Services, your local authorized dealer for Connecticut water treatment systems, Royal Credit Union, Twill in the Edina Galleria, and Onyx Maps. Thanks everybody for coming on out.
So much coming out, there's nothing going in. I know that you feel like you're never gonna win. Oh, but the world won't forgive